This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up on this week's programme, the Cyprus Ecological Movement says it's going to report Cyprus to the European Union because things at the Bendakomo waste management plant are getting worse by the day.
They're receiving the waste and then they're just dumping it into a landfill, which, despite being a huge problem environmentally and health-wise, also means that we are actually violating EU directives and we have been wasting EU funds because both of these plants were created with EU funds.
And the 21st of September is International Day of Peace. It may seem like an oxymoron in the current state of affairs, but there will be celebrations in Cyprus at the Home for Cooperation.
Coming together and working on this community engagement and the education for peace, the resilience that is required to kind of push through, it becomes very important. So on the occasion of the International Day of Peace, we're coming together, yes, to celebrate our achievements, but to also kind of give each other the space and support that we need.
We're joined now by the Secretary-General of the Ecological Movement in Cyprus because they say they're reporting us to the European Commission all about Bendakomo. That's the waste management plant in the Limassol district, which we've talked about countless times on this programme over the last several years. Effie Xanthou is going to tell us what's going on. Effie, as I said, how many years have I been talking about this on the programme and it's still apparently ongoing? What's the problem?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. We think it's one of the biggest scandals that exist right now on the island. I mean, in general, waste management has been very poorly managed from the beginning. I mean, we knew that it was going to be a very big part of our EU transition, and nothing was happening at the time. I mean, everything was very late in coming through, legislation that had to come, infrastructure that had to be built, everything was being delayed. So anyway, at some point in time, finally, at the end of 2017, we got a waste management operation system happening for Limassol, right? So it was supposed to be helping out in dealing with waste management for Limassol and hopefully increasing to include Paphos as well as soon as we started with the separate collection at the source, because it would mean that you would have less tons of actual waste that would have to be taken to this management facility, because everything else would have been sorted, like recyclables and organic waste. So this actually never happened. The government says that the plant never actually operated the way it should be operating. So for many years, they were going from one problem to the other. The management company, the company that built it and was trying to manage it, was saying that they were having huge problems. There were issues that needed to be addressed. They were asking the government for their consent to go forward with changing whatever the problems were with the whole process of the waste management, and they wouldn't get a straight reply. And they could be right about that, because we've been trying to get to the bottom of this, and it seems like a lot of coincidences were happening. Like, the responsible authority originally was one ministry, the Ministry of Interior, and then it turned out that they changed that into the Ministry of Agriculture because of the whole scandal with the waste management facility in Larnaca. So they started off with new people that had no previous experience with dealing with waste management. Then when they were dealing with them and they were asking for changes and ways to deal with these things better, they wouldn't get a straight answer. At some point it was because the Department of Water, which was responsible for the waste management facility, they didn't have a director. And then when they did have a director, in a short period of time, unfortunately, he got very sick. So anyway, they're trying to say that this was ongoing all the time and they couldn't get a straight answer, they couldn't fix things, but the waste management system was operating, albeit lately, because they kept having to fix their machinery because of all the wrong waste that was going towards them.
Let me interrupt you for a moment, Effie.
Of course.
This operator, is this a private company?
Yes, when the government came out for both waste facilities, they decided that they were going to ask for a construction, building and management of the waste management facilities. For the first one that they did in Larnaca, it turned out that there was so much money being handed out under the table that we ended up with one of the biggest scandals. I think you all remember Saba and the Koshi scandal. This is what I'm talking about. And then when the second operation system happened, the management company kept saying that we needed to do specific changes. They wouldn't let us. Our machinery was breaking down. It needed months to fix. We went through the COVID period, and it was difficult to get things and spare parts to come through. But anyway, they're saying that they were doing their best to be able to manage what they could when they could. The government said enough is enough. They interrupted the contracts end of 2023, and they decided to take over the operations of the waste facility. Now, that's where our problem starts, because the government decided that it was best for the people, for the environment, for whatever other reasons that they were putting down, that it was the best way to stop the management from this private company and for the government itself to take over. Now, for anybody that is living in Limassol or close especially to the area of Pendagomo, they will realize that this is like even worse. The previous management company had its problems, but at least they were trying to operate the whole plant. It seems that the Department of Water is not operating the plant. They're receiving the waste, and then they're just dumping it into a landfill, which, despite being a huge problem environmentally and health-wise, also means that we are actually violating EU directives, and we have been wasting EU funds, because both of these plants were created with EU funds. Now, we tried to address this. We started from May trying to have a communication with the minister herself and telling her, this is a huge problem. Your department is not doing things in the proper way. They're violating the legislation. And obviously, because it's a government department, you can't have your environmental department issue them a fine. You can't have the environmental department take them to court, because it's already been dealt with many times before in court. The government cannot sue itself. So we were basically asking the minister to look into this, to check out what on earth happened and why we ended up with this scandal, because obviously this is not something that happened within like the few months that she was minister, and because there was already a report done from a 3-member committee that had been appointed in 2019, but they didn't give a report until 2023. It took them 4 years to finish this report. And she had it on her desk, Gavis had it on his desk, Mr. Tsenofondov had it on his desk, and nobody was doing anything about this report. So there is also a scandal within the scandal, that the Ministry of Agriculture is not actually dealing with whatever problems arose and have been reported.
I have to stop you there. The one thing that keeps coming back to my mind as you speak, Effie, you talk about things not working. When tenders were issued, and goodness knows that's how long ago, to build this thing because we had to shut down our landfills, surely somebody was checking that the company that got the tender was able to do what they were being asked to do. And from what you've been saying, the company itself accepted the whole job without, or possibly with, knowing that it couldn't fulfill all those obligations.
No, it doesn't seem to be the case, because when they received the okay to start operating, it did work rightly. But after a few months, they started to have malfunctions. Now, they're saying that, they were trying to fix their machinery, and they would find that there was too much glass accumulating, because obviously we're not recycling and a lot of glass was coming in. This wasn't in the report when they were given the specs to create the plant. They were given specs of what kind of waste they would be receiving. And it seems that they were receiving a lot more glass. They were receiving heavy metals, because they were bringing in industrial waste as well, not just municipal waste. And one of the other biggest issues that they were having was that there was a lot of humidity. So the specs said that the waste that was going to be received would be maximum 40% humidity. But they were doing their own analysis, and they brought this to Parliament from 2021. I was there, and I was flabbergasted when I saw that. They said that they were doing analysis, and the analysis was coming through anything between 60 and 70% humidity. And this was not just in the winter, where maybe, you had rainfall or something. This was also in the summer. And they were trying to address this. They were trying to explain that your municipal waste collectors, which obviously are the municipalities and the communities, they have to be careful what they actually put in the garbage trucks, and they bring them to this thing. They can't go to an industrial area and collect aluminum shavings and heavy metal batteries and radiators from cars and just dump them in municipal waste when they're supposed to be trying to separate compost as well. I think that it's very obvious when you actually go to the nitty-gritty. Now, I'm not saying that, I have no idea if the company was wrong in any process, but they did receive the okay from the ministry. And when they were facing problems, they really tried to address the problems. They were coming to Parliament. They were sending letters to the parliamentarians. They were sending letters to the various government departments asking for their consent, basically, to change things, the way that the plant was operating, so they could make it work better. And they were getting no responses. They were getting no, green flag to move forward.
That's what I was asking, is that if they were a private company, why did they need the permission of the government or Parliament to change the way they operated to make them meet the specs that they had said they could?
Because it's a government plant. It's not their plant. They built it and they were going to be operating it for a contract of 10 years. They could not change anything. They had to go according to their contract. And what my problem is right now, because I have been looking into the data, and what is mind-boggling for me is this. The government says, enough is enough. We haven't been operating well with you. We don't like you as partners. You're a private company, and you're not up to par. Okay, fair enough. And they end the contract. My problem is that our government has not made sure that they can operate this thing, because they're not operating it. So the private company was doing a haphazard job. That's what the government is saying. But the government right now is doing no job. Nothing whatsoever. They are receiving the waste and they are dumping it. We're going to be coming out with more photos today because we are receiving information from the people that are directly affected by this. We are receiving, as an organization, information from people that are living close to the area, that are working close to the area. There are even people that are working within the compound, because they see that everything has gone far worse, and the repercussions are going to be huge to their own health, obviously, but also to the rest of the area, to the region itself. And let's not forget that one of the biggest problems that we have with waste management is when we have seepage in underground water, because Cyprus does not use underground water only for irrigation processes. We also use it to drink. So we might be drinking contaminated water, which the government will not be looking into because they are directly responsible now. Before it was a private company and they could say whatever they want. They could throw whatever fine they wanted because the operation was happening from the private company. Now the operation is happening from the government itself.
Is the government not checking the quality, for example, of groundwater in the area to conduct a proper scientific study of what impact this is having?
They should, but remember, it's the same government department that are responsible for the quality of water that is now operating that plant. It's the Department of Water Resources. It's the same people. They will not be issuing a fine to themselves, or a sister department like the Department of Environment will not be issuing a fine towards them. The reason that we have ended up we are sending our report to the EU by the end of the month, is that there's a fact that the minister responded by saying, what you're saying is preposterous, and we vehemently deny it. We've sent pictures, we've sent videos. We have the reports of the community leader of Pendakomo, which is directly affected by this. And yet, the audacity of a minister coming back to us and saying, you're lying, basically, but using much better phrasing, I suppose, is what has made us do this. We don't trust our government, either to protect us the environment, or even our welfare. Because the money that was spent to create this plant now has to be returned to the EU. If our government came out and said, this plant never operated, and if you go to the media, you will find 3 ministers at least saying the same thing. This plant never operated. That's what they're saying. Okay, if it never operated, why did you sign it off? Why did you agree to the way that it was going to be built, the way it was going to be constructed? Why did you give them the money for the construction? Why did you use EU money to do it? This is something that they're not answering. And also, to be totally honest with you, the output is very different because a waste management facility has output. So it's creating the recyclables that they're selling. There's water that is being created because obviously through the process there's a lot of water being created and they're supposed to be cleaning it up and then reusing it in their processes. And you have the SRD, the RDF that was being created, which is supposed to be like energy waste that was going to be sold off to Vasilikon cement plant or any other plant that wanted to use it. In a way, trying to create a bit of a better management of the waste product that was being created.
Well, that didn't work, did it? Because of the high moisture content, and people said they couldn't burn what was given.
Which is very interesting because that's what we were hearing in Parliament all through 2021 and 2022. But the company right now is saying that they managed to fix that, but the problem of the government was that they wouldn't allow them to sell the fixed product because they said that they fixed it in a different way than what was stipulated in the contract. So they experimented in finding a way to make the whole product, the RDF and SRF, so that it would be compatible with what it was demanded by the cement factory. They were selling it. They actually were. They sent us bills. They had sold this product to the Vasilikon cement plant. And the government was saying, no, you're not supposed to do it that way. You're supposed to do it this way. So we're saying that you're not producing what you said you were going to be producing. I mean, I really don't understand what our government was trying to achieve. They wanted to take over a plant that they were saying was not operating properly without having the know-how of actually operating it. They're not operating the plant now. All the waste that is being collected in Limassol is dumped into the landfill. Paphos is dumping anyway because they never managed to find a way to, reduce the waste so that waste from Paphos would come to Limassol as well. And now we're finding out that Larnaca is it's dealing with more tonnage than it could anyway. And they've been dumping their waste too.
Can I just ask you, Effie, we have to start wrapping this up. Let me just ask you,
I understand.
We are obliged, are we not, every year to send to the European Union the figures as to what ends up in landfill, what is recycled, and so on and so forth. Have you had access to those figures? What are we telling the European Union? Because if what you say is correct, then an awful lot more than we are saying is going into landfill, and we will pay heavy fines for that.
Yes, so the reporting that is supposed to be happening from this waste plants is obviously available to the government. We are going to be sending all the information that we have gathered to the EU Commission, and we're asking them to dig deeper. We are also sending this information, we have been sending this information to the Auditor General. We have been sending it to the internal auditor, who is supposed to be looking at these things even before the year is done. We have been sending it to the local authorities, the relevant local authorities and the district council. We have been sending it to the Committee for Environment. Everybody has been receiving the same information that now we will be sending to the EU. It's as simple as that. Our only thing is that, we're translating everything, so it takes a bit longer. And they've had 6 months to basically respond to what we were saying.
And has anyone responded?
No. Their response was end of July, basically saying what you're saying is preposterous and not true.
We will have to see what happens when the EU Commission finds out about this, and indeed, let's hope the Audit Office and the Auditor General start getting stuck in, because they have access to all this information, and I think we need to know. People who are separating their waste at home in order to try and help us do the recycling, if it all ends up together, once again in landfill. It's a bit of an insult, if you ask me. Effie,
Well,
we have to leave it, as I said.
That is a separate issue. That came up with the Larnaca plant, and we can talk about that whenever you want, but it's a different issue from what we were discussing now.
Okay, well, we have to wait and see, I guess, what happens. But
Yes.
really, we need to get a handle on our waste management on this island because it's all over the place, isn't it? Many thanks for
Yes.
your time, Effie. And I
Thank
look
you so
forward
much
to
for
hearing
having me.
some positive results about this in the not-too-distant future. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the fourth series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
The 21st of September is the International Day of Peace. Now, with what's going on in the world at the moment, that may seem, well, a little bit hopeful. But here in Cyprus, we've been celebrating it for many, many years, particularly in terms of bicommunality. And joining me on this week's programme from the Home for Cooperation in the buffer zone opposite the Lydra Palace Hotel in Nicosia is Andri Christofidis, and from the Association for Historic Dialogue and Research, Yannis Minas. Now, you've both been working, I think, for many years on bicommunal rapprochement. How important is International Peace Day to these efforts?
International Peace Day is very important in promoting our work. It's a chance for us to celebrate our projects, our work, to showcase the world what we have been doing, and it's a chance for all of us to get together and celebrate our common goals and achievements.
I'll come in a minute back to you to tell us a bit more about the AHDR, but if I come to you, Andri, Home for Cooperation has been going for how many years now? It's a long time since it was inaugurated, and it's become, let's say, a hub, I think, for Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots to meet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've actually been around since 2011, so we're in the 13th year now. So I think we are at the stage where we talk about intercommunality. We try to kind of open up a bit more and invite and welcome people from even more communities within the Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot communities. And I think for us, this International Day of Peace, although it might be paradoxical with everything that is going on around us, it's a very important day to nurture this community resilience that we're working on and advocating for. I mean, HDR has been around for 20 years. We've been around for more than a decade. And we see, especially in the times of crisis or precarious times that we are now experiencing, that coming together and working on this community engagement and the education for peace, the resilience that is required to kind of push through, it becomes very important. So on the occasion of the International Day of Peace, we're coming together, yes, to celebrate our achievements, but to also kind of give each other the space and support that we need.
Now, I know there are a lot of events going on, but just quickly, you mentioned education, so I'll come back to you, if I may, Yanni, to tell us a bit more about the AHDR, because it's been working again for many years and tackling, I suppose, one of the most important areas of promoting the thoughts of peace and cooperation, and that is education.
So, as Sandri has mentioned, we've been established in 2003. So this is our 21st year of working on history education, as well as peace and anti-racism education. Our activities vary, but of course are focused on education and working with students as well as educators. Some of them are working on teacher trainings, on seminars and conferences with head teachers as well. And some others are more focused to the students. So we have many projects that are engaging youth and younger kids as well. And again, are focused on peace education.
And the curriculum particularly, you've been very successful, I think, in making sure that some changes have been made to our history books, because always it was the other is the enemy, and the same events in Cypriot history were presented very differently either side of the divide.
So yes, the representation from each community is quite different. The narrative is quite different, and what we're trying to do is to, through our research, our policy recommendations, and supplementary educational material that we're creating, to break this narrative, to show that there is a different, to show a different approach to how history is being told and how the narrative should be broken.
Let's come on to the events tomorrow. You've got several events happening. I think other groups as well have. I've had emails from the UN, I've had emails from other people. So can you give me an overview what you're doing, and can you give me any details about what else is going on?
Sure. So tomorrow is going to be a very busy day, also in the buffer zone here where we are in Marcodragu. Our activities start around 3. 3 o'clock we have an open discussion under the auspices of the Swiss Embassy. It's about understanding federalism in Switzerland and the ways of living in unity. It's also addressed to the general public, but it's also inviting a lot of civil society members to discuss ways forward. Then we have mini-lingo activities, which is the newly kind of produced game that Home for Cooperation created. It's a language game for aiming at younger ages. So kids can learn Greek and Turkish through this card game. Then between 6 and 8, AHDR has its ceremonies in the conference room. It's going to be an opportunity to honor and celebrate all those involved in the projects of AHDR, a teacher award ceremony, a certificate ceremony for its youth ambassadors and its youth participants, and then the screening of its new campaign, Look for the Story. Then following that, we're going to have basketball games, because Peace Day this year is also celebrated in collaboration with United Sports Cyprus, which works on their own way in bringing people together. So we're going to have a very fun basketball shootout game. And of course the night ends with a party, because we've seen that music also is a very good tool to kind of bring people together. And
it always ends with a party.
And food.
and food and drink, yeah, it's always good fun. So Yanni, and what about the other events that I mentioned? Can you give me any details about those?
There are some, as Sandri has mentioned already, it's a full day in the buffer zone and out of it. I know there are some events that are going on in the Leader Palace as well.
I think on the same day, in the morning, the UNFICYP, UN Peacekeeping Forces in Cyprus, is organizing a mural painting by some artists. And then also it's a bigger conference that United World Colleges is organizing for its own participants. So there are also different other activities that are taking place outside the buffer zone in Nicosia and outside of Nicosia. There is a bike ride, celebrating mobility. There is a lot of different things happening here, yeah.
Okay, so that's all day pretty well, but certainly from the afternoon right up until pretty late in the evening. Celebrations for the International Day of Peace, which falls tomorrow, and we've been talking to Andri Christofidis and Yannis Minas from, respectively, the Home for Cooperation and the Association for Historical Dialogue and Research. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.